La 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 Shivenu Hashem Elecha Venashuva Chadeshamenu Kedem Alai lai 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 Alai lai 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 Alai lai Okay, Ari, can I borrow your watch? Does it work?
Yes, sure.
Because this, I guess, energizer batteries are not what they used to be.
Yeah.
It's not so old, this one. Okay, thank you very much. Ooh, fancy watch. Okay, so welcome to Aryeh, and let's do it again. Avram,
Lev Goldstein,
Lev,
Jake,
and Yoshua, and I'm Barak. And I see Mata Esther is watching, and Zahava, and Yael, and my mother watches every week. Welcome, Yossi, come.
Big crowd.
Yeah, Baruch Hashem. See, you bring him in. It's really Zach that was here last week. Okay, so we're in the 3 weeks. Normally I bring a guitar and play. That chair over there is broken. If you want to bring another chair from the other room.
They're both broken?
One of them is broken. Just check it before you sit down. We're in the 3 weeks now, so I didn't bring the guitar, and I stopped shaving. My beard grew very fast. Yeah, it's amazing. I was like clean shaven last week, and then boom, this thing. Okay, so since you guys are new to the lesson, and I think Jake asked, what are we learning at all? You can see that I'm schwitzing well, Baruch Hashem. We're learning from Likutey Moharan, which is the collected teachings of Rebbe Nachman of Breslov, who was a peer of the Alter Rebbe. Since you guys are studying on Mayanot, to give you some historical perspective, at the same time the Alter Rebbe, Rebbe Nachman, they knew each other, they interacted with each other, and at the same time that Chabad Chassidus is coming out, so Breslov Chassidus is coming out. The Rebbe Nachman is one of the great grandsons of the Baal Shem Tov through his mother, one of the great grandsons of the Baal Shem Tov. His grandmother was the Baal Shem Tov's daughter, Adel, Udim, different pronunciations, who, when the Baal Shem Tov passed away, basically his daughter Adel took over as the Rebbe, and for a few years until there was a successor, eventually the Maggid of Mezrich. And so Rebbe Nachman grew up in the home of the Baal Shem Tov in Mezhibuz, like literally in the same house, because that's how things used to work in those days. You know, lots of families lived together. People didn't have much money. And Rebbe Nachman passed away at 38 years old when in Uman, and he knew that he was going to die. He had tuberculosis. He was very weak and sick, and he moved specifically to Uman because there was a massacre there. There were 2 massacres there. Around 50,000 Jews were murdered, which at the time was like the Holocaust, because there was no Holocaust at that time. Just to have 50,000 people murdered within, I think it was a few days. I mean, physically it's kind of a hard thing to murder that many people. You don't have guns, you're killing people with swords and strangling and whatever. And so it made a huge impression on Rebbe Nachman. He said, I'm moving to Uman, I want to be buried there, and when I'm buried there, after I'm buried, I want everyone to come every year on Rosh Hashanah for my yard site. That's why 50, 70,000 people go to Uman every year for Rosh Hashanah. What is Rebbe Nachman bringing in the Likutey Moharan? He has many concepts, but This is basically Kabbalah, like from Zohar, but filtered down in a way that can be understood for normal people and written in a language that's more accessible. And what we try to do in this class is bring that language even more down further so that it's really practical in the most straightforward, simple way. We've gone through, I think we've had about 400 classes recorded online, so we've gone through a lot of Likutey Moharan. Ari's been at almost all of them. Yeah. Bezras Hashem, it's going to get married soon. Have a good reason to move away. Or come back, whatever, we'll see. Bezras Hashem. And so what we're learning now is lesson Hey. In lesson Hey 5, in the second part of the Likutey Moharan, there's two parts. Now, Rebbe Nachman had basically a partner in his building the Chassidic library of Breslov. Rebbe Nachman was his name. Rebbe Nachman, who was younger than Rebbe Nachman and lived to about 70 years old, he basically wrote all of the Likutey Moharan. He either heard it directly from Rebbe Nachman or heard it from one of the Chassidim, and then would go back to Rebbe Nachman. Rebbe Nachman would edit it, and they published the first volume. Then they published a second volume, and they probably would have published more had Rebbe Nachman continued to live. But one of the things that Rebbe Nachman said to Rebbe Nachman is, I want you to write things that you learned from me. Like you write your own, you develop Breslov Chassidus even further. And so what we're using here is Likutey Moharan HaMeforash, means with commentary, with the Perush of a rabbi who's living here now in Jerusalem. He's about 40 years old. His name is Rabbi Eliyahu Atiyah. He happens to be a genius with a photographic memory. And he grew up in a home of Mekubalim, of Kabbalists, and he became a Breslover, lives in Har Nof, or now he lives in Ramot, but he grew up in Har Nof. And he was able to take all of Rebbe Nachman and Rebbe Nachman's works and put them all together with the original text and an explanation on top of it. So that's the introduction, what we're learning and who we're learning from. The lesson that we're learning, we're going to finish it tonight. So I wanted to give a summary of the whole lesson, so I figured I was going to do it at the end, but I'll do it at the beginning. And I have Ari's watch here, so I'm okay. So the lesson starts off with, it's the longest lesson in the Likutey Moharan, by the way. Here's the beginning. See, the beginning goes so far back. It starts off with the quote, blow the shofar in the month of Tishrei. And then Rebbe Nachman says, Ha'ikar shekol Torah v'amitzvot hu ha'emunah. What is the purpose of all of the Torah and mitzvot? Yeah, El says maybe you're my Rebbe Nachman. He'd have to start writing down all the lessons though. He says the purpose of the whole Torah and mitzvot is emunah. If we want to sum up the whole lesson, and this is the 11th week that we're learning this lesson, that is the summary of the whole lesson. The whole purpose of Torah and mitzvot is emunah. Now you can ask yourself, well, what does that mean? What do you mean? God gave us the Torah so that I would have emunah. What for? It doesn't make any sense. So I'll just explain that very briefly. Bezras Hashem. God created the world. This is a lesson that we learned. It's Samech Daled, 64. Why did God create the world? Because, and there's things that we can't understand. Like there's certain things that God does that we can't understand. There's some things we can't understand. For example, why is there good? Why is there evil? We understand that because in order for there to be good, there has to be evil. This is a world of free will, meaning that people can do anything they want. They can do absolute good, they can do absolute evil. But we can't understand why, God forbid, a baby is born with a terrible disease. We can't understand it. We could logically understand why somebody was in an accident, why somebody died in a war. Those things we can logically understand. We can't understand the reason behind it. So there's certain things that we can understand, certain things we can't understand. We don't know why, but God decided that He wanted to create this world and take all of our souls, put them in a physical body, in a world where there's free will, where we can choose whatever we want, and He wants us to choose Him. That's, in a nutshell, what this world is about from a Jewish perspective. And all Chassidus that you'll learn, in one way or another, is connected to that on some level. It might be a very deep level, it might be a higher level. That's the purpose of it all. So this world has to be a world of absolute free will. If, for example, this light bulb flickered every time you asked it a question, one time for yes, two times for no, the whole world would have no reason to exist. On that simple of a level, if God was exposed in this world in such a revealed way, we would have no free will anymore. Because, let's say you went to the light bulb and you said, hey God, should I marry this woman, yes or no? And clicks once, says yes. So you marry her. You figure, God said to marry this woman, so I must be marrying the right person. Anytime you have problems in the relationship, you say, hey, I didn't choose you. God told me to marry you. I didn't have any choice in this at all. So if you get to that point, you can get to that point with anything. Should I turn left? Should I turn right? You ask the light bulb, it flicks once, twice, and then you don't have to take any responsibility for your decision. What's the point of creating the world?
Should I come to class tonight?
Should you come to class tonight?
Yeah.
I'm not the light bulb. There was once the Urim V'Tumim
No, you're saying.
that the Kohen HaGadol could ask questions and it would reveal things, but that's long gone. And that was only the Kohen HaGadol, and that was only like one person with one thing. So it wasn't like the whole world was able to ask him. So if we understand that the whole world was created for us to make choices, and really the only choice that we have is between good and bad. Because we all know, everybody in their own lives, and I don't even know everyone here, you didn't have a lot of choice in what happened in your life. You didn't choose where you were born. You didn't choose your parents. You didn't choose your height. You didn't choose the circumstances where you were born. You could have been born in poverty in Africa. You could have been born in wealth in the United States. You could have been born in all kinds of places. Those things you don't choose. Your intelligence level, your physical strength, so you can work out and get strong, but you can only get so strong. You can't get beyond. You don't have control over those things. The people that you'll marry, the children that you'll have, you don't have any choice over the children that you'll have. The person that you marry, you can't marry anyone in the world because not everyone will come before your face. Only a small range of people will come in front of you and you get to choose. Am I going to marry this one? Am I going to marry that one? Or I'm not going to marry any of them at all. Those are really the only choices you have. So we like to think, I can do anything, I can be anything, but the truth is that we can't. So we don't have so much choice in this world. But we always get to choose, am I going to do something good? Am I going to do something bad? Am I going to choose something that connects me to Torah and mitzvot? Or, God forbid, the opposite? And those are really the choices. So now, if we come back to the beginning, we say, Zikar shekol Torah v'amitzvot to emunah. The purpose of the whole Torah and mitzvot is for a person to have emunah. That means that they're choosing to have a relationship with Hashem. That's why the Torah and mitzvot exist. And the Torah and mitzvot really only exist for us. There's mitzvot for non-Jews, but it really only exists for us to choose Hashem. And then he says, "Tzarich kol echad lechapes et atzmo ulechazek et atzmo be'emunah." So now that you know that your job in this world is to always choose to connect with Hashem, you need to strengthen that emunah. You want to ask something? We're just stretching. Anyone who wants to ask is welcome to ask a question, except for Yossi. He has too many questions. I'm just joking. You get like 3 questions in class. To strengthen the emunah that comes down from above and to increase it. To increase additional light and vitality and consciousness and awareness of Hashem. ודבר זה נעשה על ידי כך שמסלק דעתו ומוחו לגמרי ויאמין בהשם יתברך. And how do you do this? You take your intellect, you toss it aside, your understanding, the way that you think you understand the world, you toss it aside and you serve Hashem simply because Hashem said so. So for example, if we say, should you do the mitzvah of not stealing because it makes sense or because Hashem said so? So the answer is because Hashem said so. Because a person can justify stealing. You could say, well look, I'm stealing from the store because the store adds an extra 10% because they know people are going to shoplift. And who knows, maybe nobody's going to shoplift this year. So if I shoplift, I'm making the store owner an honest person. And logically, you could justify in your mind why stealing would be the right thing to do. But if Hashem says don't steal, then you don't steal, even if in your mind you could figure out a way for it to make sense. Serving Hashem with simplicity means to take all of your sophistication and toss it aside. It doesn't mean to serve Hashem like a stupid person. We want to use our intelligence to understand how to serve Hashem. But when it comes to serving Hashem, we want to serve Hashem like the simplest Jew, without asking questions. Now, this lesson goes very deep. I just want to do a quick overview of it. He says that there are sometimes afflictions, such as illnesses or trouble that people are in life, that can't be healed no matter what the person does, even if they daven, even if they give tzedakah, even in the merit of their ancestors. And the reason is because they don't have complete emunah in Hashem. They don't have complete faith in Hashem. And he calls this emunah nefula, calls this fallen emunah. Because the Jews, we eat a piece of bread, and if you look at the words we say in Birkat HaMazon, we're blessing Hashem for the creation of the world. We eat a little piece of bread, and then we say, Hashem, thank you for creating the whole world and everything in it, and for taking us out of Egypt. And it's like really a little exaggerated. But there's a lesson in that. What a Jew does has an impact on the world. The way we behave and the way that we believe has an impact on the whole world. And Rebbe Nachman says that when we have these fallen faiths, emunot nefulot, they're actually scattered around the world, and they counterbalance how the world relates to the Jewish people. So if you look, the example that I gave in this class was the 1967 Six-Day War. So there's May and there's June 1967. In May 1967, the state of Israel, over here in Gan Sakir, dug a grave for, I think, 10 or 20,000 people. They were literally digging out Gan Sakir to just have a mass pit to bury people. There were mass pits being dug all around the country. People were setting up bunkers and sandbags, and they were ready for the end of this country. They thought it was going to be another Holocaust. And the Holocaust ended, in 1945. This is 1967, so you're not very far away from the Holocaust. And the state of Israel won the War of Independence, just barely. The 56 War, it was a great success, but it wasn't like the 1967 war, where all of the Arab armies were going to come against the state of Israel. And within 6 days, everything had turned around. The Israelis took over the Sinai, they took over the Golan, they took over all of Jerusalem, and the world was amazed. Now, at that point, the Jewish people had complete faith in Hashem. You can go to the most secular Israeli tank commander and say, how did you win the 6-Day War? They'll say, I can't explain it. Logically, it doesn't make sense. If you know about West Point, the military college in America, so what do military colleges do? They teach about wars. Going back from ancient times all the way to modern times, they explain how did the army build itself up, how did they win the war, because if you're going to be a general or an officer, you have to understand these things. No military college teaches the 6-Day War. There's nothing to learn from the 6-Day War, not from a military point of view. The 73 War they teach, because that was a big disaster over here. Israel almost lost. The whole country was almost destroyed in the Yom Kippur War. But the 6-Day War, no explanation for it. It was simply a miracle, and that's it. So all of a sudden, the Jewish people, before that, the Jewish people, meaning here in the land of Israel, maybe in general in the world, they didn't have so much faith in Hashem. After the 6-Day War, they had a lot of faith in Hashem. And if you look at how the world, meaning the United Nations and the United States, we didn't have such a great relationship with the United States always. It really started after the 67 War. They didn't even want to send us weapons during the 67 War. And France, that was the main supplier of weapons for Israel, they also cut off the weapons in the 67 War. Afterwards, everyone wants to be our friend. The whole West supports Israel. Things have changed because the Palestinians understood that we're strong militarily, we're weak when it comes to explaining ourselves to the world, and that way we failed. And you can see anybody that's been on a college campus or anybody that reads any news, you'll see that the world is basically against us again. But this change in the balance is dependent on the Jews' faith. This is exactly what Rebbe Nachman says here. So he says when the faith of the Jewish people changes, it creates converts. And you'll have a wave of converts. I'm guessing after the 67 war, there were a wave of people that came here and converted. Because they want to be part of the winners. You know, when the Jews left Egypt, so we have the, what's it called? Erev Rav. Well, we had the Egyptians that weren't Jews. You know how it worked in Egyptian times, in ancient times when we were in Egypt. So you could only be part of the family. Nobody could convert to Judaism back then. The only conversion only came after the Torah was given. Then anyone who accepted the Torah and mitzvot became a Jew at that point. So we didn't have a Beit Din like we have now and the whole thing. It was just basically being part of the Jewish people, which is the story of Ruth, in the book of Ruth. So back then, the only way you could be part of this Abrahamic faith, or the Hebrews, we weren't really Jews until we got the Torah, was to marry into the family. So if you married somebody who was a descendant, or married from a descendant of Abraham, of Abraham, you became one of the Jewish people. So there were a bunch of Egyptians, apparently millions of them, that left Egypt with the Jews. Hey, Koch. This chair is broken. We can sit over here. I'm giving an introduction for like another 10 minutes, and then I'm going to finish the lesson. We're going to be on part 19.
Part 19.
Yeah, in this lesson. So you have time to look for it. So who is this Erev Rav? Who are all these Egyptians that are... It's not like they loved the Jews before, but they saw all these miracles in Egypt. They see millions of slaves leaving, and not everybody left, by the way. There were plenty of Jews that stayed behind. And they joined the Jewish people. So this is the power of our emunah. When we have faith in Hashem, we affect the world. When we have less faith in Hashem, we affect the world. And Rebbe Nachman says that this faith also allows a person to heal and for their prayers to get through. Yeah.
A quick question about faith and about the war. I mean, did the faith come after the miracle of the war? So, I mean...
But isn't that obvious?
Yeah, because you're saying that they were digging grave sites. So obviously there was no faith. So, so the faith was dependent on the miracle.
It's because we're not on that level. That's the level of a tzaddik,
So
to have that level
I'm
of
saying,
faith.
is that really faith?
It is faith, absolutely. Let's say, God forbid, a person was sick. They're sitting in the hospital and they're saying, Hashem, please, please, please heal me, please, Hashem, get me out of here. Now they're out of the hospital. Their level of faith in Hashem is much higher, because there was always a doubt when you're in the hospital bed, God forbid. Whereas, a person owes a lot of money and they say, Hashem, I need help, and help is not coming. They want to have emunah, but when the money is actually in your account, like cash in your hand, you've got emunah. Now, it's a pity, it's a pity that you couldn't have that emunah before you had the cash in your hand. But that's how we are, unless we're on the level of being a tzaddik, that's how we are. However, that emunah is very strong. Like, I've known people that were single for a long, long time, and then they got married. And some people would say, we'll never get married, and now they're married. Their level of emunah, would they get married or not, is much stronger after they got married than before. It's just human nature. But the fact is that emunah does affect the world. When you have that emunah, it affects the world. Bring it down to a simpler level. When a person is happy, it's infectious. You walk around the shuk and you're in a good mood. I can tell you because this happens to me a lot of the time. Normally in a good mood, vendors just smile. They want to talk with me. They want to give me things. It's the funniest thing. I really don't understand it. I see beautiful women in the shuk. They're giving gifts all the time. Here's some extra grapes. Here, take this extra whatever. I come, they give me 2 boxes of grapes. Like, why? Like, I just like you. You're just a nice guy. I really don't know why. But I can tell you that makes me happier. And then I walk around the shuk and I see more people smiling and more people in a good mood. So that makes me even happier. I get to the point where I just want to shout, the Kodesh, Shabbos, Kodesh! Something I'll do it in the middle of the shuk. You'll see people laughing. They're laughing from the absurdity of it. But this is how the emunah works. It's piling on top of itself, getting stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. It goes the opposite way as well. Oh, things didn't work out for me. Oh man, my life sucks. Everything is terrible. I'll never get out of this. You pull yourself further down. Your friend comes and says, hey, let me help you. Like, get out of here. I don't want to see you. I don't want to see anyone. God forbid a person drinks or smokes drugs or things like that. If they're in a state like that, forget it. You're gone. You may not come out of it for a year. So it really matters, your emunah, how you treat it, and also our emunah as a Jewish people affects the whole world. The balance of the whole world is based on that. So he says, you want to come out of your troubles, you have to have this absolute faith in Hashem. And you have to work on it all the time. Our relationship with Hashem is a relationship just like with anyone. If you, whenever everyone here is married, Bezras Hashem, my son, who's 18, he told me this joke yesterday. He said, this guy got married like 20 years ago. I really hope it's a joke. And his wife said, we've been married for 20 years. You never told me that you love me. He said, we were under the chuppah together, right? She said, yeah. He said, I loved you then, right? She said, yeah. He said, if it changes, I'll tell you. So you don't want a relationship like that. It's a relationship where with your wife, and I can just tell you, I'm married now for 25 years, maybe 26. I have to ask my wife. She'll tell me exactly how many years. She'll say, we're married this many years and we've known each other this many years. And this big secret to staying married, look at the good points in your wife and tell her that you love her and you appreciate her. And if you don't say that as much as you possibly can without annoying her, you won't have much of a relationship. The same thing with the relationship with Hashem. How do we have a relationship with Hashem? With my wife, I can talk with her. She talks back to me. With Hashem, you don't want Hashem talking back to you. That's not healthy. You want to sense Hashem, but you don't want to actually hear Hashem. And we live in Nachlaot, so there's some people that hear Hashem.
That's the truth.
But you want to feel Hashem, and the way you feel Hashem is you turn to Hashem and you say, Hashem, thank you for this, or Hashem, I need help with this. And this constant talking with Hashem and asking Hashem, which is really built into the davening, it's really built into Shmona Esrei, which is what we say 3 times a day. If you ever pay attention to the words, you'll see that basically everything that you could ever need in life is covered in Shmona Esrei. And it's the rabbis that were smart enough to know that not everybody's going to be in a state of mind where they can focus and they can really talk to Hashem from their heart. So they said, fine, we're going to give you words. You're going to say the words. And hopefully when the time comes that you need them, you'll actually pay attention to what you're saying. That's how you build a relationship with Hashem. Emunah is the basis of the relationship. You want to say something? What?
I was just wanting to go back to the Exodus thing, because...
So let me hold the thought for a second. Emunah is the basis of the relationship with Hashem, which is where we started the lesson, which is the purpose of all of creation, which is the purpose of the Torah and mitzvot. That you turn to Hashem all the time. You ask Hashem for help. You thank Hashem for everything that you have. When a person gets a paper cut, or God forbid, a person has a heart attack, and both of those people are praying to Hashem, whose prayer is a deeper prayer? The paper cut or the heart attack? I'm telling you, it's the paper cut. Because the heart attack, God forbid, and everyone should be healthy. It's clear that you're going to daven to Hashem. Even an atheist would daven to Hashem after that. I don't know what they would daven to. They would say, something out there help me. But you get a paper cut, you're like, Hashem, this one I can handle. I got this one. But that's where the emunah really comes. When something small happens and you say, Hashem, I need help with this and I need help with that. That's how the relationship is built. Okay, go ahead. What do you want to ask?
It's not really ask, but...
What do you want to say?
Point out that in the Torah it says that all of Israel left, and a great multitude came out with us. It doesn't say that part of us was left behind, but part of us stayed behind.
The fifth left.
No, it says in the Torah, clearly says and states that all of Israel left. Now the reason, went away.
There's a machloket. Let's say there's a machloket.
The ones that died on the fifth night.
Okay,
The darkness.
that's what you wanted to say?
And I was going to point out the reason that the rabbis point out that thing that's a lie is because they're going off of what happened with Babylon. And so since not
Right,
everyone
but
left
that's not
in
related to the
Babylon, they
lesson.
said, well, obviously, since that, but I really, I know the text.
Okay, fine.
And
Maybe you're right. We'll find out when Mashiach comes. I'll take
all
the
you
word
have to
for
do
it.
is open up the book and
That's
read.
fine. That's okay. But I want to stick with what we're learning in the
I
lesson here.
understand, but when you said that, it just,
No problem. So you added your amendment. Okay. So he has many ways of basically the whole part of the lesson that I'm skipping over here is that Rebbe Nachman is trying to bring all kinds of ways for us to realign our relationship with Hashem. One of them, I'll give a few examples. One of them is keeping the holidays. One of them is putting on tefillin. And one of them is learning in yeshiva with a Torah teacher who is a true teacher. It's not always such an easy thing. This is the only lesson I give during the week. I'm also not a rabbi. And I started this lesson many years ago because I went to a mekubelet with my wife, and this woman turns and says, "You need to teach a class in Likutey Moharan." So I just figured, okay, I'm going to do it, and I started teaching it. It's very hard to find like a really sincere, good rabbi that can stay focused and teach you all the time. I can vouch for Rabbi Silberg. I don't know the other rabbis in the yeshiva, but Rabbi Silberg is a good friend of mine, and he's the real thing. He's really the real thing. He's a very special guy. So when you have like a real good teacher who's sincere and works on himself as well, that can help you to build this relationship with Hashem. When you put on your tefillin, what are we putting the tefillin on in the morning? It's to basically ground us. It's to keep us focused, which is why if you're talking about something unrelated to davening, you're supposed to take the head tefillin and move it to the side. Sometimes you'll see people in shul with their tefillin over here. The first time I saw it, I was like, wow. I mean, you try to align it, right? That's really off. So I went to the guy, I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, we're talking about business. Like, I have to move my tefillin. So the tefillin are there. Now we have to be conscious of it. The tefillin are there to ground us. And what are they grounding us to do? They're grounding us to have a relationship with Hashem. Now Rebbe Nachman says, and now we're getting towards the last section here, he says basically our crisis with Hashem comes when we see injustices in the world that we can't understand. When there's things that just can't make sense to us, we can't understand it, that's what breaks our relationship with Hashem. And, everybody thinks should go well for you in life, but sometimes there are things in life that happen that you feel like you can't forgive Hashem for it. And the example that he brings here is the Rasha Betovlo, the Tzadik Sheralo, the wicked person that things go well for them, and the righteous person that things don't go well for them. And he also brings this, besides on the individual level, on the national level. He says, look at the Jewish people now. He died in 1810. So whatever he saw up until then. He said, look at the Jewish people and how much we've suffered. Are we not a righteous people? And of course, back then, almost nobody left Torah and mitzvot. It was the beginning of leaving Torah and mitzvot, was in the early 1800s. That was emancipation and the Enlightenment. Two huge things that basically created the modern world that we live in today. Rebbe Nachman saw the beginning of that. So he said, the Jewish people, we're not righteous. We're righteous, and we suffer. And the Goyim, they deserve all the success and power in the world. How come the Jewish people don't have it? So he says, when you ask this question to Hashem, it creates a contradiction that makes it very hard to serve Hashem. So he gives two examples. He says you have to serve Hashem as a servant, and you have to serve Hashem as a son. On these two levels. This is where we left off last week. The level, and I forgot to mention, the last class that I'm going to dedicate to Kiva Moshe and Reuben and Chasha Shifra Halevi, Alav Shalom, Nefuah Shlema of Aaron ben Chanaliva Bezras Hashem. This is a guy who lived here in the neighborhood, died at 53 a couple months ago, so I said I'd dedicate these classes to him. So, serving Hashem as a servant, here, you want the water? You have a cup? As a servant and as a son. What's the difference between serving Hashem as a servant and a son? Servant is a slave, and a servant doesn't ask any questions. The king tells the servant, bring me this. The servant does it. The king says to the servant, go climb up that hill. The servant does it. The son, meaning the prince also serves the king. But the prince serves the king on a different level than the servant, on a higher level than the servant, because he feels a connection to the family business. He wants to do more for the family than the servant ever would. He says there's on the third level, to serve Hashem as a servant and as a son, meaning the son that's a servant. He says that's the highest level. And if you serve Hashem on that level, meaning that you're the prince and you're putting on a uniform and you're going into battle, and the general says, go take that castle, and you climb up the wall, even though they're throwing hot tar and shooting arrows, and your life, you could lose your life over it, but you serve the king, meaning Hashem. You serve Hashem on the level of being the prince and a servant and a soldier. That's the highest level. And what that level means is that when things happen, you don't ask questions. You're just constantly jumping towards Hashem. Not like an idiot, like an intelligent person, but an intelligent person who could take his ego, put it aside, and serve Hashem as a simple Jew. And that's the basically where we got to, and I'm watching the clock the whole time. So he says now, ובאמת הוא דבר גדול מאוד להשליך מאיתו כל החוכמות ולהתנהג בפשיטות. And this is a very big thing, to take all of your intellectual wisdom and to toss it aside and behave as a simple Jew. לעשות מעשה עבדות לעובדו יתברך בעובדות תמימיות. To serve Hashem with the simplest way of serving Hashem, bli chokhmot, without sophistication. This is related to the secrets of the Torah. She'eno choshev b'da'ato b'ta'amei hadavar, that he doesn't try to figure out, why does Hashem want me to put on tefillin? Ela rak ma'amin, he just believes. She'atorah nisteret v'na'elamet sham, that by me putting on tefillin, there is some holy, godly secret in it, and when I put on tefillin, I'm going to connect to it. I don't have to understand why. I just do it as a simple person. You can understand all the halachot around tefillin, but to understand what is the secret of tefillin, I don't know if people can really understand it. I mean, objectively, it seems like a silly thing. So you take some parchment, and you take some leather, and you stick it on your head and you stick it on your arm, and something magical is supposed to happen. You go to a mikveh, so it's rainwater mixed with regular water, and you dip underneath, and it's supposed to purify me in some way. But anyone who has a spiritual sensitivity, just like a carpenter, they have the sensitivity to touch wood and feel the grain and feel the differences in it. When you have a spiritual sensitivity on the level of a carpenter like that, you'll feel tefillin, and you'll feel the mikveh, and you'll feel Shabbos, and you'll feel Jerusalem, and you'll feel the land of Israel. You'll feel the differences. So it's there, but you can't understand why. So you just know that it's there. And that's the example for serving Hashem. He said to serve Hashem in the most simple way. You can have all the understanding in the world. Now take that and throw it aside and just serve Hashem simply. It says put on tefillin, you put on tefillin, and you understand that there's some secrets in it. Ki כשעושה עובדות פשוטים, when a person serves Hashem simply, ובאמת ובוודאי יש בהם תורה גבוהה מאוד, so even though you don't have to understand the deepest secrets in tefillin, you're still going to put them on. You're still going to keep Shabbos. You're still going to do all of these things, because you know that within them is hidden a great secret of the Torah. רק שאין יודעים מה יש בהם. We just don't understand what it is. נמצא שהתורה יש בהם הוא נסתר ונעלם. Within the Torah, there are secrets hidden. So now he goes to say that these secrets are, he brings a quote from Shir HaShirim, which it was so strange, I wasn't even sure. I had to call my wife, who's Israeli, and ask her, is this really what it says here? It says, this is, the secrets of the Torah are related to, as it says in Shir HaShirim, Chamukei Yerechayich, the curves of your thighs. Ma yerech beseter, just like a woman's thighs, a Jewish woman's thighs would be covered because she's modest. Af divrei Torah beseter. So too the secrets of the Torah are hidden. It's a kind of a strange example to bring.
Kind of, very.
Yeah, but I guess if you're Rebbe Nachman on a very high level, you're not thinking like normal people. Okay, so now as I'm saying, that serving Hashem in the simplest way is like, even though the secrets are hidden, they're going to be revealed to you through your simplicity in serving Hashem. And then he says, Shehem Hashitim Shemecholelin V'Yodim Ad Hatahom. These are the hollow caverns that go down deep into the deepest depths. Hashitim Hem Chalal Shetachat Hamizbeach Keneged Makom Hanechasim. So it's the Shittim are these deep caverns under the ground. Kumoshe Darshu Rabotinu Zichronam B'chaz, Sidra Blessed Memory said, this is related to, so now what Rebbe Nachman likes to do, and I'm just going to summarize this, he likes to bring text proofs to prove his point. What he's saying is that the secrets of the Torah are hidden in such deep places that you can never really reveal them. The only way that you can find the secrets of the Torah is to have faith in Hashem, serve Hashem in the simplest way, and then they will be revealed to you because of your simplicity. Kind of like, I guess, the Chinese finger puzzle. I don't know if everybody saw this. For sure you did.
Yeah.
I don't know. I remember when I was a kid and we went to like the county fair, you threw a ball and you didn't get anything. They gave you this prize. There's this bamboo thing where you stick your fingers in it and you try to pull them out and your fingers get stuck. You know what I'm talking about, yeah? So you would think, okay, my fingers are in this stupid bamboo thing, pretty easy to get out. Just pull them out. Doesn't work. Like, pull harder. Pull harder, pull harder. You either rip it or your fingers will be stuck. That's serving Hashem with sophistication. Serving Hashem simplicity, the simple person would just say, oh, I'll just hold it with my thumb and pull my finger out. That's really simple. There's not like this effort and trying so hard. You don't have to understand the secrets of the Chinese finger puzzle. You just have to know. Hashem says, we're supposed to do this, so we do that. We're supposed to do this, we do that. Because, he brings all these text proofs here because we're running out of time and I don't want to read too much. Okay, so this is the last paragraph. So I'll just read the last paragraph so we'll have like a final reading of this lesson. And this is connected to what's written in Tehillim. Tehom el tehom koreh. Deep calls to deep. V'darshu ala pasuk hazeh rabotenu zichronam v'chan. Since your blessed memory in Ta'anit Chaf Hey, explain this. Shenichnasim et hamayim b'chag. Shemenaschim et hamayim b'chag. When the water libation is poured on the holiday. Tehom omer lechavero. A deep pit says to his friend, Abba memach, let your waters gush forth. Tiva v'tashpia et memecha, that your waters should come out of these caverns. Hainu tehomot korim ze lezeh. One cavern is calling out another cavern. Sheyashuvu v'yachseru hamishpat shenafal aleim. That the judgment, meaning the judgment that we can't understand, why do good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people? Can't understand it. That these things should come out of their depths and be revealed to us. So that the judgment, meaning for us, will understand why Hashem is doing these things. Why is Hashem doing these things to me or to someone else? It's written, V'yigal kamayim mishpat, that your waters will they'll well up like water. The judgment will well up like water. Is explained above. Shazo b'chinat tikuna mishpat. This is connected to the fixing of judgment. V'zeh abba mimech, and this is your waters will gush forth. That that the judgment will gush out like water. Hainu sheyabiu v'yachsaru hamishpat shenafal aleim. That is, these things in the world, and I'm just interpreting it more than translating it, these things in the world that we don't understand, when you serve Hashem with simplicity, you'll be able to understand them. Sheyitaken v'bchinat, and then it will fix the aspect of the water, that the judgment is gushing forth like water. Meaning that all of the things that you don't understand, all of a sudden, they're going to make sense to you on some level. Kanal is mentioned above. Nimtza she'al yedei asiyot ve'uvdot b'pshitut na'aseh tikun ha'mishpat. And it comes out that when a person serves Hashem with simplicity, this fixes their inability to understand the injustice in the world. Ki al yedei ha'tzadik zocheh la'avin et mishpatav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That through the tzaddik, so that's a higher level. If you can go to somebody like the Baal Shem Tov or the Lubavitcher Rebbe when they were alive and ask them, why does this happen? Sometimes they would be able to explain it to you because they're on the level where they can see it. And even these things that Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't able to understand in his lifetime, ki al yedei siluk hamochin zocheh leseter sitrei Torah shehem megi'im at tahom. That when you take your sophistication and toss it aside, serve Hashem with simplicity, the secrets of the Torah will be revealed to you from these deep caverns. Va'az ma'alet ha'mishpat me'atahom, and then the justice that's buried deep in these caverns will come up. Umevin et hanhagato shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the person can understand Hashem's behavior. Ad shena'asu muvanim lo, until they completely understand Hashem. V'zeu tikun ha'mishpat, and this is fixing the judgment. Okay, so I'm going to share a short story with you, and then we're finished for tonight. Anyone have a question? Go ahead. You still have one more question of this. Yeah.
So, for example, it just made me think that, the guys that are learning, like in yeshiva or kollel, they're obviously advancing their knowledge in Torah study.
Yeah.
So, they might, when observing, like, let's go back to tefillin, they might have a little bit more in-depth understanding as opposed to somebody that might not know as much Torah and
Right.
just kind of being simple. So it kind of, in my mind, it kind of like makes it seem potentially, not always, the more that you might know and have knowledge, you might not necessarily be doing the mitzvah as a simple way, like you would think somebody that doesn't know as much.
It's
Just a
Yes,
thought that I had.
let's take the example of
Do
women.
you see where I'm kind of coming from?
Women in Mea Shearim. I'm going to give you an example.
Okay.
So in Mea Shearim on Chol HaMoed, they have separate sidewalks. Men on one side, women on the other. Now, my chavuta, who is an 81-year-old Breslov Chassid who grew up in Shai Chesed, but he's from like all the old classic Mea Shearim families. I said to him, you tell me, is that really doing the mitzvah of not looking at women? Like you're supposed to guard your eyes. That's a mitzvah, guarding your eyes, not to see things that you shouldn't see. So if you see a woman walking on the street, you can look to make sure you're not going to bump into her, but then you really are supposed to look aside, which is very hard for most heterosexual men. So if you're putting women on one side of the sidewalk and men on the other side of the sidewalk, no one's doing any effort. But they are doing the mitzvah of guarding their eyes.
They're putting a fence around it, per se.
Yeah, it's good. Now, really, you didn't do the work on yourself. So you did the work on yourself. And then you see a woman walking down the street and you're really able to not look at her because you worked on yourself. That would be the person that has the knowledge about tefillin but puts them on. As opposed to another person that just says, well, the men are supposed to go here, so I'm going to go there. It's having more knowledge enables you to do the mitzvah on a higher level. It's not that you don't want to have knowledge. You want to have as much knowledge as you're capable of doing. But then when you do it as a simple person. So I lead the davening during the week. I lead the davening on Shabbos. Every day of the week, it turns out I lead the davening. And I had really good teachers that taught me how to lead the davening. Not just like how to sing, but how to think. And one of the big things is if you have an ego and you lead the davening, nobody wants to ever hear you lead the davening again. It stinks like somebody passed gas in shul. And the guy who's leading the davening is like, well, I like the smell of my gas. I don't know why you guys are making the face. And the rest of us are like, we can't wait for this guy to get out of here. Now, in order to get up and lead the davening, you have to have a certain amount of ego. So how are you supposed to lead the davening in a simple way? You do it by knowing the davening well enough to stand up and lead it. But then when you lead it, you're taking your da'at and you're tossing it aside. You're taking your ego and you're tossing it aside. And it takes a lot of work to do that. That's my answer for you. Okay, so the story is, the Or Chaim HaKadosh, what was his name? Rabbi Chaim Ben Attar. He lived in Morocco. He was one of the big Mekubalim. He was like probably one of the most famous Kabbalistic rabbis. There's many stories about him. He made Aliyah with his whole community. I don't know what it was, 300 families or something like that. They all moved here to Israel. They lived in the old city. They lived in poverty. They didn't have an easy life. And the Or Chaim HaKadosh is buried in Har HaZeitim, the Mount of Olives, and you can go to his grave. It's right there. I'll just tell you, I had a hard time finding it originally. When you drive to the Mount of Olives, on the right side, you'll see the graves that come down, the old graves that are really on the mountain, facing the Temple Mount. They put up these big fluorescent lights. It's right next to the grave. So if you ever want to go visit there. So before he moved here to Jerusalem, of course, he was a well-known rabbi in Morocco. I don't remember where it was, in Casablanca. I don't know where it was. And one of the things that the non-Jews used to do was simply kidnap Jews and say, you want to see Shmuel the butcher again? Give me $10,000. And so the Jewish community would come up with $10,000 and they get Shmuel back. Sometimes they take a chassan and kala before the wedding. Sometimes they take all kinds of people. Sometimes Jews got into debt. And in those days, there was no bankruptcy. You were thrown into debtor's prison or you were killed. So one of the things that the big rabbis did was they would go around and pay for Jews who were captured and put into these situations. The Or Chaim HaKadosh, this is one of the things that he did, and he was short a certain amount of money to save a family. There was one wealthy Jew who was no longer really part of the community. He didn't keep kosher, didn't keep Shabbos, and that's one of the ways he made all his money. And he couldn't come up with the money, so he decides he's going to this wealthy Jew. Knocks on the door, and this wealthy Jew is shocked to see this great, big rabbi at his door. He says, Rabbi, what are you doing here? He said, I need 1,000 dinars, whatever it was, to save this family. And this guy is a businessman, he sells camels or whatever, the Tesla at the time. And he's like, you know what, Rabbi, I'm going to give you the money, but I want to make a deal with you. I'm going to hitch you up to my wagon. You're going to pull me through the marketplace and sing Kol Nidre. As I hit you with my whip, you do that, the money's yours. Before he knows it, the Or Chaim HaKadosh has himself hitched up to the wagon. He says to the wealthy Jew, let's go, get on. He takes him through the marketplace. Of course, there's Jewish vendors in the marketplace. And they're looking at this and they want to kill the wealthy Jew who they knew left the community. And it was really incredible chutzpah. But the Or Chaim gives him a look. Don't do anything. He's singing Kol Nidre. Pulls the wagon through the market. Takes the guy back home. The guy says, very good, Rabbi. That's how a business deal is done. You did your part. Here's mine. He gives him the money. Then he starts bragging to his friends. You know what I did? I got the holy rabbi hitched up to a wagon, pulled me through the marketplace. His wife says to him, what are you, crazy? How can you behave like that to this great rabbi? You have to go and apologize. It's like, all right, fine, I'll go to apologize. Goes to the rabbi. He says, Rabbi, I apologize for what I did. He's like, apologize for what? You gave me the money I needed. You made a condition for me. I kept the condition. It's fine with me. You have nothing to apologize for. He said, no, Rabbi, what a chutzpah thing to do, to tie you up to a wagon and pull me through the market. I mean, what kind of crazy thing is that? I'm sorry. He says, you're forgiven. Machol, 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 you're forgiven. Nothing to talk about. It's fine. I'm not angry, anything. He said, listen, Rabbi, bless me. I said, bless you with what? He said, you know why I'm not part of the Jewish community? Because I never really felt Shabbos. Bless me that I should experience Shabbos like you. So the Or Chaim says, you don't want that. He says, no, really, Rabbi, I want to experience Shabbos like a great tzaddik like you, and then I'll be part of the community again. He says, no, you don't want it. Like bent on the table. He says, Rabbi, I want the blessing. He said, I'm going to give you the blessing, but just so you know, I can't take it back. He blesses him that he should experience Shabbos like him. The guy comes home. It's Thursday night. He says to his wife, I apologize, and we worked everything out. Shabbos is coming. Can you polish the candlesticks and light candles for Shabbos? She's like, really? We haven't kept Shabbos in years. Like, yeah, I think this week we're going to keep Shabbos. He wakes up Friday morning. He says, Shabbos is coming. Shabbos is coming. Shabbos is coming. He goes to the butcher. He says, how much for a cow? Buys the cow. He gets the butcher to shecht the cow. Takes the meat, hands it out to all the poor Jews. Now, there's no refrigerators. He had to cook it, eat it within a day. And he brings home flowers for his wife, and she bakes challah, and she makes this beautiful meal. And Friday night, he's about to make kiddush. He passes out on the floor. He's out all Shabbos. Motzei Shabbos comes. He wakes up and he looks around and he says, Shabbos is coming. Shabbos is coming. Shabbos is coming. All week long, he's getting ready for Shabbos. He's going and helping poor Jews. He's telling his wife all the time, make sure the tablecloth is washed, and make sure we have candles, and make sure we have everything. Shabbos comes, he passes out. This goes on for a few weeks. He's out all Shabbos, wakes up Motzei Shabbos, like a crazy person. Shabbos coming, Shabbos coming, Shabbos coming. Now the butcher became like his best friend because he's buying all these cows and handing out all this meat. So the wife goes to the butcher and she says, this is not like my husband. He's a rational businessman. He's behaving like a crazy person. So he said, I heard that he got a bracha from the Or HaChaim. So maybe we should go and ask him. So the three of them go. And the wife says, what'd you do to my husband? He said, what's going on? He says, Kiddush Friday night, passes out, wakes up Motzei Shabbos. All week long he's saying, Shabbos is coming. He bought all the cows in town. He's giving out money left and right. He completely lost his mind. The Or HaChaim says, that's because I gave him a blessing that he should have Shabbos like me. So the wife says, well, take back the blessing. I want my husband back. He said, I can't do that. I warned him. I can't take it back. But what I can do is he can come and learn with me. And he can eventually build the kelim, the vessels, to handle the bracha. And then he won't pass out on Shabbos. And so he came and learned with the Or HaChaim Kadosh. He came here to Jerusalem, moved here with the Or HaChaim Kadosh, learned in the Old City. And when the Or HaChaim Kadosh passed away, he was buried in the Old City. This guy was his closest student. He was buried right next to him. Apparently, the graves there, it's really hard to see anything that hasn't been renovated. The Or HaChaim has been renovated, but the graves next to him, you can't tell. Apparently, he's buried right next to him. Now, when the Jordanians took over the Old City, they used the tombstone, the grave, like the cover for each of the graves, for paving the sidewalks in Jerusalem and for toilets. The grave of the Or HaChaim was not touched because they brought a tractor and the tractor flipped over. They brought a guy with a hammer. He ended up hitting his head. Everybody that tried to break the tomb of the Or HaChaim ended up either going crazy or hurting themselves. Eventually realized that it was a holy grave and they didn't touch it. And this guy merited to be his closest student. So last week was the Yahrzeit of the Or HaChaim. If you got to share a story about the Holy Rebbe. Sheshikoach everyone for coming. I hope you got something out of it. It's nice to have so many faces here. Sheshikoach to everyone who was watching with us. And we'll do it again next week, Bezras Hashem.